The whole valley probably got a good view of it coming in, which would have been kind of interesting just to see the size and scope of the plane. Speaking of which, President Obama is heading to Roseburg. David Gartenstein-Ross has just gotten back from Brussels. He were addressing NATO. And I'm a little confused, to be perfectly honest, David. And maybe I'm missing something here. And I know there are families that are hurting in Roseburg today. But there are like 300 million other people in this country that I feel might be affected even more by what's going on with Russia and how they are acting in Syria. Like that might be a bigger thing on the plate of our president right now. But I could be wrong. Am I missing something here, David?
I think the president going into Roseburg is a good symbolic thing. I mean, in part, look, obviously it's also linked to the fact that he is looking to push gun control, and meeting with the families is a helpful way to do so. One can debate the merits of that either way.
Right.
But I don't think that I personally think that having, a president go to different places, like the argument will often be made, doesn't he have better things to do? But the answer is that most of the things the president does can be done perfectly well from Air Force One. He's going to be giving speeches regardless of where he is, whether he's in Roseburg or anything else. A lot of the president's job is meeting with people, meeting with dignitaries,
sure.
Et cetera. So I wouldn't criticize him for showing up in Roseburg.
Oh, I'm not criticizing. I'm just asking the question, and I'll tell you why I'm asking the question. Because the last time we talked, I used the word dire. This is a dire situation. I asked, maybe that's too dramatic. You said it was spot on. This week, I'm watching our Secretary of Defense, I'm watching the President, and I'm watching Putin, and I feel like we look like a bunch of cowards. We're cutting and running. Do I have it wrong?
Well, no, you have it right, but what I'd say is it's not even clear what we were trying to accomplish in the first place.
Right, that's a big part of it.
And it's not clear what we thought we would accomplish in Syria. The U.S. has made its commitment clear that it wants Assad to go. It's not clear what we think would replace him. If Assad were to be toppled from power, it almost certainly would get worse immediately, in that the areas that he controls that are relatively stable now would collapse into civil war, and the minority religious groups that are being protected in the coastal areas would be threatened. So I don't. It's just not even clear to me what we're trying to do, which is even worse than us looking like cowards and cutting and running. We just look confused and that we have literally no idea. We've been involved for a while, and it seems to me that we still don't even have an articulable goal.
David, and by the way, we're talking to David Gartenstein-Ross. He's an expert on the Middle East and on terrorism. I've said for a long time, David, and I'll readily, and I've said this to the audience leading up to your interview, that if you say that I'm wrong on something, I will always defer to you because you're the expert, okay? I'm basing my stuff on how I feel. I don't believe you can sit down and negotiate and talk with a lot of people on this planet. Sometimes they only understand eye for an eye. They understand might. Putin, to me, is a guy that we are up a rope, and you know what goes in front of that. When you're trying to talk and negotiate with this guy, he understands getting punched in the nose.
Right, but again, it comes down to a question of why would we want to punch him in the nose? Punching Russia in the nose, it's a big thing. And yes, he did bomb rebels who we had vetted, but according to most sources I've spoken to, it seems that those rebels were cooperating with Al Qaeda. Now, one can create justifications for why they would do so, Al Qaeda's local branch, Jabhat al-Nusra, controls a lot of territory and will coerce other rebel groups to work with them, or else will attack them. So, one might say that it's kind of morally justifiable on the rebels' parts, but I don't see what the strategic interest is in us, supporting rebels if those rebels are going to fight alongside a group that has sworn to kill us. So Russia, it's there, and we're not happy about it. But I'm not sure what harm Russia is doing to us other than making us look weak because they're willing to attack their enemies and defend their proxies. We have trouble doing so. And further, that they are making us look weak because they're involved in Syria when our Syria policy has been failing. Now, they are making themselves a bigger regional player, and that's that's of concern given that Russia is not a particularly trustworthy power in my view. But it's not the kind of thing I'd punch him in the nose over. I'd rather, it would be much better if our policymakers would punch themselves in the nose for creating this Syria policy that makes no sense.
Well, I absolutely agree with you on the latter part. I guess where the punch in the nose comes from, and I'm just an old school guy, David. 4th of July, Putin flies fighter jets off our coast. I don't think that was accidental. I don't think he just accidentally picked the 4th of July. Everything he does is orchestrated, and I really took that personally. I really did. Whether I should or shouldn't, I took it personally. On our nation's birthday, he's flying his fighter jets inside of our airspace, and then every time he does something, the 60 Minutes interview, the speeches at the UN, followed by him moving right into Syria, I think it's all to show the world this is the team you want to be on. And when they get that alliance, Russia, Iran, and China, we could be in a lot of trouble.
I mean, I agree with everything that you said. And I think actually Putin takes particular delight in doing this to Obama. I think Putin absolutely despises Obama and sees him as a fraud. But, again, what he's doing is showing us up, right? You don't punch a guy in the nose, especially when he's the head of Russia, for showing us up. I mean, I think that I would back it down just a little bit rather than because he to use your analogy, right? He's not punching us. He's making us look bad. Maybe to analogize it to kind of the bar fight example, he might be there and he's talking trash to us. I mean, we do need. I do think that we need to think much more. And I think the Obama administration has deep trouble with this about how to rise to the challenge. And when someone is doing something particularly to show you up, I wouldn't start a war with them. I wouldn't fight them. But responding in kind, I think does make sense. But I don't think that what he's done is the equivalent of a punch in the nose. Not yet.
How do we then, David? Because I remember early on you were one who said, "Hey, we need to up our social media game because ISIS was really good at the social media game, and we were really lacking. And perception is reality. Let's be honest. And Putin knows it, and he's creating his own reality."
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely is. I think that this is I think that number one, as long as we don't have policies that make sense, we're going to continue to look worse and worse on the world stage. And one could debate, is that a product just of this administration, or is it kind of inherent to the United States at this point in the U.S.'s life cycle? I hope it's the former and not the latter.
Right.
But I think we are, as long as we have policies that don't make sense, and I've thought about it a lot, and I cannot articulate either a clear end state that the U.S. wants in Syria or any sort of strategy that the U.S. is going to use in service of attaining that end state. And as long as that's the case, where what we're doing just fundamentally does not make sense, we're going to continue to look worse. We need policies that make sense.
And that goes back to something I've said for a long time, that we vote people into office, into positions of power, who don't have the leadership experience or skill set, and they don't have enough common sense to get with somebody like yourself who is an expert in this field and take them serious and listen to what they have to say to formulate a better plan. Am I off base on that?
No, I agree with that entirely. And I think that the Obama administration in particular has relied upon a cadre of experts who will systematically tell them what they want to hear. And there's a cost to that. I mean, when you're giving people a podium to give you advice, and they're giving you advice based on the advice they think you want, you're just not going to be advised well. I mean, look, there are some competent people in the administration for sure, but this is an administration that just fundamentally, it doesn't have cognizable strategies, where it uses force, and it tends to, though not in Syria, not with the ISIS, but it tends to use it in the wrong places. The Libya intervention, which I opposed at the time, which has been a total disaster for us, complete disaster. It's ruined that corner of North Africa, displaced, a regime that, while led by a dictator, at least was stable. It's been a boon for jihadists, and it's massively contributing to this refugee crisis that is going to become a graver and graver problem for Europe. So, they need to listen to people. I mean, not only people who know what they're talking about, but people who are going to give them the news that they don't want to hear. It's that person that you really want at the table, the person who will challenge as opposed to simply verify your preconceptions.
Right. Well, David, I'm going to continue to push you until you finally say you're out of your mind, and then we'll know where the parameters are. All right?
Okay.
As always, I really appreciate it, and thanks for the email back. I know you were a little bit busy this week in Brussels addressing NATO, so thank you.
Always a pleasure joining you. You take care.
All right. David Gartenstein-Ross, he really knows his stuff.